This slides presentation will cover the basic concepts of risk versus odds, two different words that are used statistically that you need to be aware of. First, let's talk about risk. Risk itself is the risk of an event occurring out of the total number of people in a population. Okay, so if you look at the picture on the right-hand side of the slide, you have a population of 100. In A, this population's all mixed up. In B, it's separated into the 40 individuals shown in red who actually had the disease, and the bottom of B is shown in green, and those are the 60 individuals without the disease. So the total, as I said, if there's 100 people in the population, then the risk of having this disease would be the 40 divided by the 100, which is the total, or 40%. And you should know that risk is typically a number between 0 and 1. So it's going to be a decimal point. The other thing you need to know with regard to risk is another word. It's known as a risk ratio. Shown on the right-hand side of the slide is a 2x2 grid. On the top part of the grid, you're looking at the outcome of interest. That would be lower extremity injury. So here you're looking at the risk ratio for lower extremity injury based on the fact of whether or not you have the risk factor for lower extremity injury, which they're considering here muscle imbalance. So in the top left-hand corner of the 2x2 grid, you have 34 individuals who actually had lower extremity injury and were positive for the risk factor of muscle imbalance. But you also had 11 individuals who were negative for lower extremity injury, but were positive, but still had muscle imbalance. Shown in the red underneath this are the 13 individuals without muscle imbalance that actually encountered lower extremity injury, compared to 72 individuals who didn't get lower extremity injury but did not have muscle imbalance. So the question is, what's the risk of one group, the group with muscle imbalance, versus the risk of the other group, those without muscle imbalance, for getting a lower extremity injury? To calculate this, you simply calculate the risk for lower extremity injury if you have muscle imbalance, which is 34 divided by the total is equal to 0.75. Okay, and then you divide that by the individuals who didn't have muscle imbalance but still had lower extremity injury, which would be 13 divided by 13 plus 72 is equal to 0.15. So the risk ratio for lower extremity injury in this example would be 0.75 divided by 0.15 is equal to 5. And a risk ratio of 1 means that the groups are identical in risk. And all this risk ratio is doing is comparing subject with the risk factor to subjects without the risk factor for the outcome of interest. And in this example, that was lower extremity injury. And the way to interpret a risk ratio of 5 is that individuals with muscle imbalance are 5 times more likely to have a lower extremity injury than those without muscle imbalance. So, moving on, next word you need to know is odds. And odds is similar to risk, only in risk you're looking at the chance of having the disease out of the total population. With odds, you're looking at the number of those with the disease divided by number of those without the disease. And in this case, where risk was a number from 0 to 1, the odds of something happening are going to be a number from 0 to infinity. Okay, and an example of that shown on the right-hand side of the slide, where you have the individuals in red are those that have the disease, and there's about 40 here. Those shown in green, about 60, and they don't have the disease. So what, out of the total population, what are the odds of having this disease? And that is simply the total number of those with the disease, which was 40, divided by the total without the disease, which was 60, and the odds of having this disease in a population of 100 is 0.66. So moving on to a similar term, this is something known as the odds ratio. And here you're looking at the odds of the problem occurring if somebody has a risk factor or not. So really you're looking at the odds from one group calculated divided by the odds from the other group calculated. Okay, the example shown on the right-hand side of the slide of the same 2x2 grid, only you're not looking at risk anymore. Now you're looking at odds. So instead of using the rows to calculate things, you're going to start to use the columns, because you're looking at the odds of having the outcome of interest. So here, to calculate these odds of having the outcome of interest, you take the individuals that are positive for muscle imbalance, which are 34, and you divide that by 13, okay, and that'll give you 2.61. And those are individuals who are positive for lower extremity injury. Those individuals who are negative for lower extremity injury, you have 11 divided by 72, and if you calculate that, it's 0.15. So the odds ratio for lower extremity injury in all of these individuals is going to be 2.61 divided by 0.15 is equal to 17.4. And that's the odds ratio. It tells you the odds of the problem occurring depending on whether or not you have muscle imbalance as a risk factor. Another way of stating this is that your odds of having lower extremity injury are 17.4 times greater if you have muscle imbalance as a risk factor.